Welcome. I'm Dr. Tom Dawson. I want us to talk a little bit about bedwetters and those children that are still not making it through the night dry. First of all, I want you to realize that if your child is less than 6 years old and they're not dry at night, you don't have a bedwetter. You just have a normal child. Because even in regular normal children, 10% of those folks are still going to be wet at night. So we don't even talk about it in children that are less than 6 years old. But we do want to talk about what causes them to be bedwetters, how to fix it. And I think after we talk about it, you're going to all come away realizing it's a miracle that any of us are dry at night. So to understand it, I think the easiest way to think about it is as if we're a family that lives next door to the train tracks. And when the train goes by in the daytime, our eardrums rattle and it sends a message to our brain. And our brain says, well, that's a train. And so that works fine. Now at night, all of a sudden people think that things are totally different, like that we're a little almost dead or that we're in some altered state where things don't work like they do in the daytime. But the truth of the matter is our sensors, our ears, and the things that measure the stretch in our bladder, those things all work daytime or nighttime. And it's just a matter of what our brain turns in and what our brain tunes out. I have a ton of moms that are really heavy sleepers. And then they have a brand new baby sleeping down the hall. And they hear every little peep that baby makes. So it's all about what we selectively tune in and what we selectively tune out. So likewise, at night, when we live by the train tracks, the train goes by, our eardrums rattle, it sends a little message to our brain, and our brain goes, well, that's a train. But by the way, we live by the train track, and so we normally just will sleep through the train, and it's done it our whole lives, and everything should be fine. And that's what we do. Same thing goes with our bladder. As our bladder in the daytime stretches, when it's full of urine, when it stretches, it sends a little message to our brain, and our brain goes, oh, well, my bladder's full. I think I better go pee. And they go pee, and that takes care of it. At night, a similar thing happens. Their bladder fills with urine and stretches. It sends a message to the brain. Brain goes, well, my bladder's full, and I've always just stayed in a diaper at nights. I usually pee at night and sleep through it, and everything works fine. And that's exactly what we do. So the real question is, why do we expect as we get older to continue to sleep through the night when the train goes by? But now all of a sudden we're expecting us to wake up when our urine and our bladder is stretched out. So it's really, think about it that way, it's a miracle that any of us ever wake up at night to empty our bladder. But for some reason, most kiddos do. So by the time they are 6, 9% of kiddos have figured out how to do it on their own. What I usually do is once they get where I have a ton of kiddos that have been trained during the daytime for months or years even, that are still wearing a pull-up at night. And I just say they stay in their pull-up at night until they have a week of dry pull-ups, and then we can switch them to big boy underwear. And sometimes some incentive, like their big brother or their next door neighbor being in big boy underwear will help. So I'm not saying incentive can't help with these things, but it is a process that just kind of happens on its own. So once they have a week of dry pull-ups, then they can go, to big boy underwear. Well, what do we do about the ones that are 6 years old and are still wet at night? What can we do to help? Well, primarily there's 3 things we can do. 1, we can limit and restrict a little bit of the fluids that they have late in the afternoon and evenings. 2, we can develop a reward system. And 3, we can consider using an alarm system. So with the water or fluid restrictions, what I normally do, and what works for me, is after like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I say that they can have nothing but water. And water's fine for hydrating you, but it's just not fun enough that you're going to drink too much where you're going to have to pee a lot at night. So I do that. And then I would say after 7 o'clock that they can't have anything to drink at all. Now, if that's too harsh for you, or if your child is complaining that they're parched and they have to have something to drink, then I would just get them a little spray bottle and fill it with water. And if they're parched, they can spray a few sprays in their mouth, and it will wet their mouth and make the thirst go away without actually giving them, a ton of extra fluids. So that's the restriction of fluids. Then the most common thing we will pair with that is a reward system. And the reward system is, to compare it back to our train, if you told me that every time a train goes by, you would give me $100, well, then the next night, even though I've been sleeping fine when the train goes by for the last, few years, the train would go by, my eardrum would rattle, it would send a message to my brain, and my brain would go, well, that's just a train. We live by the train tracks, so we sleep through it. But then another little part of my brain would go, well, wait, if I wake up, I get $100. And then I would wake up and start hearing the trains when I had been sleeping through them for the last, series of nights without waking up for the train. So the same thing will work for your bladder. And so what we do is we find a reward. Sometimes it may be 3 M&Ms. It may be a trip with mom to the park, perhaps a Maserati. You have to decide what's right for your family and for your moral system, and decide what reward is best. But keep in mind, we want a reward for every night that they're dry. We don't want to have it where you have to be dry for an entire week or for an entire month to get a reward. We want a reward every night that you're dry, because success works a lot better than failure. So figure out what reward's right for you, and then that usually will work fine. Now, keep in mind, it may take a few months for the system to work, but it usually will work. So while we're working on the reward system, and keeping in mind it may take 2 or 3 months for it to really kick in and help, remember that they're the ones that are in charge of the whole bedwetting thing. So if they have an accident, their bed is wet at night, they're responsible for putting a towel over the wet spot, or perhaps pulling off the sheets if they need to. And certainly the next morning, they're responsible for pulling the wet sheets off of the bed and carrying them in and putting them next to the washing machine. Likewise, I'm not a big fan of the system where mom is setting her alarm to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she goes in to wake the child up and take them to the restroom. We're not trying to train mom. We're trying to train the child. And so as much of this responsibility as we can put on the child, the better. If mom is waking you up every night to go to the bathroom, then your brain says, well, this is mom's responsibility. I don't have to worry about it. I'll just continue to sleep through the night and continue wetting the bed like I always do. So let's make it their responsibility to change. If that doesn't work, then the next thing we will go is to an alarm system. And there's tons of little enuresis alarms or bedwetting alarms out there. I don't usually recommend products. So if you go on the internet, there's a bunch out there, and you can just read the consumer ratings and find one that'll work for you. But the way those work is they have a little sensor that clips inside the underwear. And when it gets wet, that makes the contacts a connection, and the alarm will go off. To go back to our train analogy, if I'm lying there at night in my bed where I've slept by the train track for years, and you connect the train track to an alarm, well, then as I'm laying there and the train goes by, my eardrum rattles and sends a message to my brain, and my brain says, it's just a train going by. We live by the train tracks. You can sleep. There again, that little other part of my brain goes, wait a minute. If you don't wake up, that alarm next to the bed is going to go off and scare the heck out of you. And so then I wake up for the trains again. And so this is the same way that the alarm will work, for their bladder stretching also. Like the other, it frequently takes 2 or 3 months for this to kick in. So you have to be a little patient with that sometimes. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about medications that help with bedwetting. And so there are some things that help. The most common is a medicine called DDADP, which is a medicine that actually teaches your kidneys to make less urine, so there's not as much urine to pee at night. And I have sometimes used these medicines for short-term period of times for older children that are going to perhaps a sleepaway camp, or their best friend's birthday party has a sleepover, and those things may be okay. To be honest, I don't love using a medicine that is so strong it's telling your kidneys to make less urine, to use that type of medicine for something that I consider kind of a normal variant in terms of being a late bedwetter. So it's not my favorite, but I sometimes have used them in folks that have trouble getting started with these things. Here again, this is a normal variant. It's going to get better on its own. Like we talked about, 99% of these kiddos had a parent that had the same problem, and you all turned out okay. So this is going to turn out fine too. So try these things. I hope they help. If anything's not going like you think it should, good time to talk to your doctor. But I hope this will help.